Sophia watched, a quiet ache in her chest, as her apartment mate Briar twirled and posed in front of the ornate standing mirror, a vibrant burst of carefree energy. Briar really is utterly oblivious, Sophia mused, a sigh catching in her throat. Not only were daunting final exams just weeks away, but Briar also had a mountain of overdue assignments from the last semester looming over her. Yet Briar seemed completely unconcerned, humming a cheerful tune as she carefully applied a glossy layer of cherry red lipstick, then pursing her lips and winking playfully at her reflection. How on earth will she ever make a competent veterinarian? Sophia wondered, a flicker of doubt crossing her mind. A runaway model, perhaps, but certainly not a healer of animals. What's she even doing in vet school anyway? Soph, aren't you joining us? Briar's voice cut through Sophia's thoughts, bright and eager, as she put the finishing touches on her already dazzling face. Or are you going to stay glued to those books all day, again? Sophia reluctantly tore her eyes from her textbook, offering a small, tired smile. Yes, I think so, she murmured, a genuine weariness settling over her. I'm just not feeling very well today. You go on without me. Briar slipped on her bright yellow rain slicker, gave one last dramatic flourish in front of the mirror, and then with a light-hearted skip was out the door, leaving Sophia in the echoing quiet of their shared space. From the tiny kitchen, the vintage refrigerator hummed a steady, rhythmic drone. A wistful, forgotten ballad drifted slowly from the old radio perched on the windowsill. Sophia, lost in the labyrinth of her own mind, barely registered these background sounds. Despite the brilliant sunshine outside, this early spring afternoon held a deep, aching sadness for her. Today marked the second anniversary of the devastating accident that had claimed her parents' lives. It had been a day eerily similar to this one, warm, clear, and brimming with the promise of spring, when the unthinkable had happened. In the historic brownstone where they lived, a faulty electrical surge had ignited a catastrophic fire. Several apartments had been utterly destroyed, reduced to charred husks. Residents perished instantly, their final moments mercifully quick, barely registering what had occurred. Sophia had struggled to accept that her parents were truly gone. She often found herself drawn back to the painstakingly restored building, standing on the sidewalk, gazing up at the gleaming windows of what used to be their home, a desperate, irrational hope clinging to her heart that their loving faces might somehow appear at the glass. But the windows remained stubbornly empty. Now she felt utterly alone, save for a kind young man, a park ranger named Owen, whom she had met in the aftermath. He had been among the first responders, bravely assisting in the evacuation of survivors, and later sifting through the tragic debris, reverently recovering the remains of the lost. Sophia was profoundly grateful to him for his quiet strength during that horrific time. Over the months, her gratitude had slowly, tenderly transformed into something far deeper, a burgeoning love. They had begun dating, despite a slight age difference. Owen was 7 years her senior, but the profound experiences of his work, spent immersed in nature and often dealing with its raw, unpredictable power, had carved a quiet wisdom into his soul. He possessed a maturity beyond his years, a grounded calmness and a philosophical acceptance of life's unpredictable currents, keenly aware that at any given moment his own life could be drastically altered or even extinguished. This acute understanding of life's inherent fragility had been seared into him during a harrowing rescue mission years ago. While battling a raging wildfire in the remote wilderness, his closest colleague and friend had tragically perished. So, Sophia and Owen, both having experienced the searing loss of loved ones to cruel, unexpected fate, understood each other, with a deep, unspoken empathy. But lately, their connection, forged in the crucible of shared sorrow, had begun to cool, a subtle distance creeping between them like a creeping fog. Why? Neither of them could truly articulate it. Sophia snapped her book shut with a soft thud and glanced at the antique clock on her nightstand. As always, Sunday was galloping by far too quickly. Just a short while ago, it had been early morning, and now the hands pointed to 2:45. Still, there was a little time left. She picked up her cell phone and dialed Owen's number. The impersonal, recorded voice of his voicemail system answered, inviting her to leave a message. Sophia sighed, letting the phone drop onto her bedspread. It had been the same frustrating routine for days now. Was he truly avoiding her? To push away the suffocating darkness of her thoughts, Sophia decided to visit her parents' graves and perhaps tidy up their plots. Dressed in comfortable, warm gardening clothes, Sophia stepped out of the apartment and carefully locked the door, tugging the spare key into a secret nook behind a loose brick in the entryway. She had, in her haste, forgotten her phone lying on her bed. The Oakwood Cemetery was only a brisk 15-minute walk from her apartment. Of course, she could have taken the suburban bus directly to the gates, but on such a perfect day, taking public transport felt almost sacrilegious. Sophia, gripping the sturdy rake she had borrowed from her neighbour, strolled leisurely along the paved pathway, admiring the dogwood trees that were just beginning to unfurl their delicate white blossoms. The air was fragrant, with the scent of freshly turned earth and blooming hyacinths, and from every direction came the joyous symphony of birdsong. Robins chirped their territorial warnings from the highest branches of the ancient oak trees. Energetic sparrows joyfully trilled their quick, cheerful melodies, and gregarious blue jays seemed to be gossiping and cackling with spirited glee. For a precious moment, Sophia completely forgot her anxieties, revelling in the sheer exuberance of spring, her eyes fluttering closed as the warm, buttery rays of the sun caressed her face. Pausing at the corner, Sophia peered into a bustling flower stall and purchased 4 vibrant tulips, her mother's favourite. Thanking the cheerful vendor, she continued her walk, and soon a modest wooden fence appeared, encircling the sprawling, ancient cemetery. Without much difficulty, she located 2 familiar mounds among the countless graves. The girl immediately began raking the stubborn, last year's leaves into neat piles. The cemetery was quiet, save for the gentle rustle of leaves and the faint, comforting sounds of other people working nearby, their hushed voices ensuring she didn't feel entirely alone. As she carefully wiped down the small plaques bearing her parents' photographs, a lump formed in her throat, threatening tears. But then, catching the sight of her mother's warm, smiling face, Sophia couldn't help but smile too, a bittersweet memory of all the good times they'd shared. Her father's face, in contrast, was stern, even sombre. A retired military man, he had never quite shed the rigid routines of army life, viewing a tranquil, civilian existence as somewhat unworthy for a man. The only thing that truly brought him joy was spending time with his daughter. He had devoted so much time to Sophia, raising her with his own disciplined, military-minded approach, that she sometimes felt that there was more of the masculine in her than the feminine. It was because of her father that Sophia had first enrolled in nursing school, and upon graduating, pursued medical school, choosing a path much like his own, that of a surgeon. It was a demanding, often brutal journey, but whenever Sophia thought of her father and his unwavering fortitude, she always found the strength to push forward, determined to make her parents proud. She hoped somewhere they were indeed proud. Sophia believed they were always near, invisible yet as close and loving as they had been in life. Well, that's much better, she murmured softly to herself, carefully arranging the fresh tulips on the grave. It looks tidier now, and I'll plant some lily of the valley here too. I'll dig up some from the park and put them in. I think it would be lovely. Sophia, removing her gardening gloves, wiped her damp forehead and rocked back and forth, stretching her aching back. The sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows, and the warm southern breeze had given way to a chilling northwestern wind. Catching herself realizing the cemetery had grown utterly silent, Sophia felt an uncomfortable chill creep over her. The long, broad shadows from the trees stretched across the ground, making the ancient burial ground feel even more ominous. "I'll be back," Sophia promised, nodding to her parents' graves. "I love you. I miss you." And gathering her rake and the bag of leaves, she hastened her step towards the exit. The old stone crypt, whose gaping dark entrance always sent a shiver down her spine, lay directly along her path. Its centuries-old red brickwork had sunk almost halfway into the earth. The crypt itself, whose original occupants and construction date were long forgotten, was now a receptacle for refuse, casually discarded by indifferent townspeople. When Sophia was a child, she often heard whispers that a madman lay within the crypt, emerging on dark nights to prey on unsuspecting victims. Of course, there was no actual madman in their quiet town. The area where Sophia lived was peaceful, almost boring, one might say. The appearance of a genuine active madman would certainly not have gone unnoticed. Nevertheless, the crypt held a grim reputation. Long ago, a homeless vagrant seeking shelter there had frozen to death, turning the crypt into a local legend. Because of this, the local kids had long been wary of venturing inside, convinced the deceased's spirit still lingered within. Even now, as she hurried past the moss-covered structure, Sophia involuntarily held her breath, half expecting some horrifying hunched figure to leap out from the shadowy depths of the opening. Trying desperately not to look directly at the crypt, Sophia tightened her grip on the rake handle and broke into a nervous jog toward the cemetery gate. "Help me!" A weak, groaning voice suddenly rasped from behind her. "Miss, please help me!" Sophia shrieked, a sharp gasp escaping her lips, and lunged forward, as if hoping to somehow fly dozens of yards and clear the fence in a single bound. As she landed, her sneaker caught on an unseen fragment of an old broken gravestone, and she tumbled onto a grave, striking her head hard against a brick. Ignoring the searing pain and the immediate trickle of blood, Sophia scrambled to her feet, instinctively crawling forward. From an outsider's perspective, she might have resembled a heroine in a horror film, desperately trying to escape a villain at the climax. "Wait, please!" the voice pleaded again. "Help me, I beg you!" Sophia froze, pressing her back against the wooden fence, and peered into the deepening twilight. The dark silhouette of a stranger moved slowly toward her, moaning softly, swaying drunkenly. Very quickly, Sophia distinguished perfectly human features. Matted, dirty hair, a torn, grimy coat, and a face contorted by pain and fear. The stranger was young, yet he moved like an ancient man, clutching his right hand to his stomach. "Help me," he rasped, stopping just 2 steps away. "I've been stabbed." Unable to stand any longer, he collapsed to the ground with a sickening, gurgling sound. Sophia, genuinely terrified again, but this time not for herself but for him, rushed forward. "What happened to you?" she asked, kneeling down. "Where were you hurt? You need to go to a hospital," she exclaimed, gently trying to lift the man. "Can't go to a hospital, it's dangerous," the stranger whispered, his voice barely audible. Just help me here." "But how can I help you here?" Sophia asked, bewildered. "You need real medical attention. Who knows what's been damaged? Maybe your spleen, maybe your liver. If it's your liver, that's serious." "Are you a doctor?" the man managed to ask, lifting his head slightly. "Well, almost," Sophia admitted, shrugging shyly. "I'm still studying. What am I going to do with you?" She looked up at the moon, which had just rolled into the night sky, as if seeking its counsel. But the moon, as always, remained silent, leaving Sophia to figure it out alone. "I live nearby," she said, gently patting the injured man's cheek. "About a mile. Can you walk that far?" "I'll try," the young man chuckled weakly. "Just help me." Sophia, as she shouldered the surprisingly heavy weight, asked herself with dark irony who was having a harder time, her or her injured charge. But there was no other choice, and biting her lip, she half-dragged, half-carried the young man toward her apartment. "Who in the world is this?" Briar asked, walking into the living room, a hand pinching her nose. "Ugh! What's that smell? Is he a tramp?" Sophia, after administering a double dose of fast-acting anaesthetic she'd learned about in class, carefully stitched the thoroughly cleaned wound. It didn't look too severe, despite the significant amount of blood the stranger had lost. Thankfully, no vital organs appeared to be damaged. His breathing was calm and steady, his pulse and heartbeat normal. There was no sign of a high fever either. "You won't believe this, but I honestly don't know who he is," Sophia replied, deftly wielding the curved needle. "It all happened so suddenly," and, continuing her work, she recounted in detail her unsettling trip to the cemetery. Briar, scrutinizing the young man sprawled on the sofa, grinned slyly. "He's actually not bad looking," she remarked. "Quite handsome, actually. And that coat isn't cheap, by the way. Maybe he's a criminal, since he didn't want to go to the hospital. What if he double-crossed his partners, and this is their way of sending a message? I've seen that in movies." "Oh, Soph, you really have gotten yourself into something now. What if his partners find out about you and show up here?" "Oh, Briar, don't be silly," Sophia laughed, despite herself. "There wasn't a soul out there when I was pulling him along. I couldn't even find anyone to ask for help to call an ambulance. Why do you think he's a criminal? He'll tell me everything himself when he comes to, if he wants to. If not, that's his business. My business is to help a person. After all, I'm going to be a doctor, and doctors save everyone, the good and the bad. My father even treated enemies during the war. He always said that when wounded men were brought to him, in that moment there were no friends or foes, only those who needed help. That's what he taught me." She finished stitching, neatly snipped the thread and disinfected the wound one last time. The young man groaned softly but didn't awaken. With Briar's hesitant help, Sophia carefully bandaged him and covered him with a quilt. It was still only 7:45, but to Sophia it felt as though an entire night had passed. "Maybe we should have some tea," Sophia suggested, pulling off her gloves. "Let's leave him to rest." "He's in pain right now. He's suffering, but I think he'll pull through." "But what if he doesn't?" Briar suddenly asked, her voice laced with anxiety. "What if he dies? What will we do then? You don't even really know what he was stabbed with, what internal damage there might be." "He'll pull through," Sophia stated firmly. "He's strong, and if it happens as you say, well, then I'll take responsibility. I brought him here. I'm accountable." And without another word, she extinguished the living room light, her bare feet softly padding across the floor. The next morning, Sophia, eager to check on her patient, found the living room empty. On the quilt that had covered the young man lay a small crumpled note. Thank you. The small crumpled note simply read. Well, he's definitely a bandit, Briar sighed, peering at the hastily scrawled message. Who else would bolt with a hole in their stomach? Or maybe he escaped from prison. Sophia tidied the quilt, fluffed the pillow, and settled onto the sofa. Let him be. She waved a dismissive hand. What concern is it of ours? He's not here now, and no one knows he ever was. Gosh, we don't even know his name. To cut through the sudden tension in the room, she clicked on the television. Briar returned from the kitchen with 2 steaming mugs of coffee and sank onto the cushion beside her. Sophia, clicking through channels with the remote, stopped on the local news broadcast. Whoa, there he is, Briar whistled, poking a finger at the screen. That's him! Turn up the volume! Yesterday afternoon, Grant Calder, the son of the late prominent businessman, was abducted from the offices of his own company, the news anchor voice announced, silencing the 2 young women. 3 masked individuals forcibly dragged him through a rear exit and drove him to an unknown location. His security guard, who attempted to intervene, was wounded and remains in critical condition. The fate of the kidnapped Mr. Calder is currently unknown. We have to call the police, Sophia suggested, nervously biting her nails. Though, what good would it do? We don't even know where he is now. I wonder why he left. And why was he kidnapped? Briar took a sip of her coffee and shrugged. We'll probably never know, she replied. He's certainly a mysterious character, this Grant Calder. Good thing he's not a bandit, though. I was really starting to worry about that. And honestly, he looks even more handsome on TV. Plus, he's clearly got money. I knew he wasn't a bandit, Sophia remarked, a touch of satisfaction in her voice. You always jump to the wildest conclusions, Briar. It's because you don't trust people. I don't trust men, her friend retorted, a flicker of old hurt in her eyes. I've been burned too many times, but I trust people. Briar paused and then continued. This Grant, for example, probably got himself into this mess because of his male nature. Maybe he cheated on his wife and she decided to get revenge. Or he hurt someone's child and refused to acknowledge it. Things like that happen, you know. Sophia chuckled, nudging her friend with her shoulder, making Briar nearly spill her coffee. All right, Agent Pinkerton, that's enough theories, Sophia said, rising from the sofa. Whatever happened, it's really not our concern. I suggest we get back to studying. Briar shot a hateful look at the textbooks and notebooks lying on the table, but didn't argue. Sophia, as always, was right. The mysterious story of Grant Calder soon faded from both friends' minds. Their penultimate year of medical school was drawing to a close, and all of Sophia and Briar's thoughts were consumed by preparation for the upcoming final exams. Besides that, Sophia had another pressing concern. Owen, the park ranger she had been dating, had inhaled too much smoke while putting out a brush fire and had been hospitalized. That's why he hadn't been in touch all this time. For Sophia, the most important thing was that he was alive and relatively healthy. Life in general continued its rhythm, and the incident at the cemetery ceased to trouble her after only a few days. A week later, on a rainy, gloomy Friday, the friends emerged from one of the university buildings after a long, tedious day of classes. Evening was approaching, and Sophia, planning to visit Owen, who was still in the hospital, pulled her phone from her pocket to see a ride share. Unexpectedly, 2 massive dark SUVs pulled up to the very steps, scattering the clusters of students with their imposing presence. 2 burly, bearded men stepping out of the first vehicle strode purposefully towards them, asking questions. "Does anyone here know Sophia Redmond?" one of them boomed, his voice reaching Sophia's ears. "Where is she?" Craig, a tall classmate of Sophia and Briar, pointed at the two girls standing on the porch. Sophia's blood ran cold. Her first instinct was to turn and run, but something rooted her to the spot. "Sophia Redmond?" the bearded man asked, climbing the steps toward her. "Yes, what's happened?" Sophia stammered, her voice trembling. "We're here for you," the stranger said, a chilling smile playing on his lips. "Please, step into the car." He gave Sophia a light shove on the back, and feeling the immense force emanating from him, she dared not resist. How could she, when her legs suddenly felt like cotton and a fine, unpleasant tremor seized her entire body? "And who exactly are you?" Briar interjected, seemingly unafraid of these menacing figures in dark suits. "And where are you taking her? Are you completely out of your minds? Hey, everyone, someone's being kidnapped! Someone call the police!" "Hey, pipe down," the bearded man hissed at her. "No one's being kidnapped. We're from Grant Calder." "Grant Calder?" Sophia gasped, astonishment washing over her. "Why didn't you say so right away? And where is he? What happened to him?" "He's at the hospital," the man who had pushed her nodded. "He's waiting to speak with you. So, shall we go?" "Yes, of course," Sophia exclaimed. "I was just about to head there anyway." "Soph, maybe you shouldn't." Briar tried to stop her, a worried frown on her face. "What if they're lying?" Sophia, gathering a surprising surge of courage, looked at her friend with a gentle reproach. "It's fine," she smiled. "You have to trust people a little, remember?" And she stepped forward, towards the car door that had already been obligingly opened for her. Grant waited for her, sitting by the window of his private room, located at the very end of the long hospital corridor. Noticing Sophia enter, Grant tried to push himself up, a polite gesture of welcome, but a sharp grimace contorted his features. He slumped back onto the pillows, clearly racked with pain. "Come in, don't be shy," he invited, his breath still a little ragged. "I've been waiting for you. I wanted to properly thank you." "You already did," Sophia replied with a soft smile, settling onto the chair beside his bed. "I read your note." "Oh, that? No, that note was barely a start," he insisted, a faint flush colouring his pale cheeks. "I'm truly sorry I left so abruptly. There were some urgent matters to attend to." He paused, a sheepish glint in his eyes. "And yes, I'll answer your unasked question right away. I learned your name and where you study by, looking through your purse. I saw your student ID. I sincerely hope you can forgive my complete lack of tact." He looked at Sophia with genuine contrition, shaking his head slightly. "So, if you don't mind me asking, why did this happen to you?" Sophia ventured, shifting subtly in her seat, her curiosity now firmly outweighing any lingering shyness. My friend Briar immediately jumped to the conclusion that it was a gang war. She was absolutely terrified, and I'll confess, even I was a little unnerved when I saw your guys. Grant took 2 crisp ruby-red apples from a bowl of fruit on his bedside table, offering one to Sophia, who politely declined. "You see, my father was quite a wealthy man," Grant began, his voice taking on a more serious tone as he meticulously peeled his apple. "Well, wealthy by our city's standards, certainly. Perhaps not on a national scale, but locally he was very well off. At the beginning he partnered with a childhood friend who, after a few years, decided to sell his share to my father, convinced that these part shops were a complete waste of time. But later, when the business truly blossomed into something significant, that partner, seeing his mistake, wanted back in. The opportunity, however, was long gone. That's interesting, but I don't really understand much about business, Sophia interrupted gently, a slight furrow in her brow. Could you perhaps get closer to the part where things went wrong? The prologue often holds the most crucial clues to a story, Grant chuckled, a wry smile touching his lips. In short, this former partner evolved into something of a crime boss, a powerful figure, if you will. He cultivated some very unsavoury connections. Surprisingly, that didn't prevent him from securing a government position and even getting elected to city council. It's incredibly dangerous when individuals like that acquire power, even a limited amount. He must have nurtured a profound resentment towards my father, Grant went on, his voice dropping slightly. So, almost 15 years later, he resurfaced, demanding his original share. When my father flatly refused, he had him killed. Killed him? Sophia gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. And he wasn't arrested? There wasn't a shred of tangible proof, Grant explained, spreading his hands in a gesture of utter helplessness. A deserted highway, the dead of night, an empty city bus careening into my father's car. From outward appearances, it seemed like an absolute tragic accident. But then, mysteriously, the bus driver suddenly died while in custody. My theory, his conscience must have buckled under the weight of his secret. He was about to change his testimony, but then they started threatening me. Thankfully, I don't have a family of my own, or they would have applied the full, brutal pressure. Grant, Sophia rubbed her palms together, a nervous habit she barely noticed. I'm sorry. Please continue. Anyway, one particular afternoon, a few hulking men in masks burst into my office. He continued, his voice tight with the memory. They gave me a thorough beating, then drove me straight to that cemetery. They stabbed me, then dragged my body into that old crypt, believing I was dead. I even heard them planning to bury me in my father's grave, once night fully descended. And then, after they finally left, I somehow managed to crawl out and saw you, Grant concluded, looking at Sophia with intense gratitude. You know the rest of that night. Sophia still looked perplexed. But what happened after you left my apartment? The first thing I did was reach out to a prosecutor I knew and trusted, Grant explained. The local police were utterly useless. They're all compromised, tied up with that snake. He thought I was dead, you see, which made him careless. Well, he's exactly where he belongs now, and he won't be seeing the outside world again anytime soon, if ever. Grant finished his harrowing narrative, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, exquisite velvet box. Here, he said, extending it towards Sophia. Take this. These are the keys to a secure locker at the supermarket, right by your apartment. Inside, you'll find the keys to a brand new apartment. Move in whenever you wish. It's completely yours. We'll finalise the legal documents once I'm fully recovered. No, you can't, Sophia protested, immediately trying to hand the elegant box back to him. That's truly far too much. Take it and don't argue. Grant cut her off, his voice firm but gentle. You saved my life. An act like that is absolutely priceless. You have a boyfriend, don't you? I saw his photograph. He looks like a great guy, a firefighter. So, consider this a wedding gift. You two are planning a wedding, aren't you? Probably, Sophia chuckled, a soft blush spreading across her cheeks. We haven't explicitly talked about it yet. He's actually here in this very hospital, recovering from an accident. Well then, I certainly won't keep you any longer, Grant smiled, extending his hand. I imagine you have plenty to discuss." He paused, his gaze earnest. "And thank you again, Sophia, truly, from the bottom of my heart." Sophia, shaking his still weak hand, turned toward the door. "Oh, and my friend Briar," she said, pausing at the threshold. "She was there that evening, helping me bandage you up. Anyway, I think she quite liked you, even though she thought you were a bandit at first. I believe she'd be thrilled if you ever dropped by for a visit." Grant looked at her thoughtfully, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, and nodded. "I'll stop by," he promised, "and please extend my warmest regards and sincere thanks to her." Sophia offered Grant one last radiant smile and walked out of the hospital room, clutching the small velvet box containing the key in her trembling hand. That summer, during their break from classes, Sophia and Owen celebrated a beautiful, intimate wedding. Briar stood proudly as the maid of honour, arriving with Grant on her arm. With a joyful, mischievous grin, it was Briar who gracefully caught the bridal bouquet, a promise of happiness yet to come.